Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the Kidlit Distancing Social. My name is John Bard. I am one of the owners of Children's Book Insider, writing blueprints. And we're really excited tonight to have David Harrison with us. He's been a friend for a long time to CBI. And, he speaks for himself. Laura has all I can say is Laura has 3 screens worth of stuff to introduce her. That's how much this guy's accomplished. So we're looking forward to that. And that'll come along in just a minute. Before we do that, just a little bit of business to take care of, and this is especially for the new folks. If you want to be on our list so that you can make sure that you get the topics every week and also the replay links, here's a way to do it and also get a really cool freebie. It's the Ultimate Children's Writing Cheat Sheet. It's something we put together to celebrate our 30th anniversary, and you can see what's on there. It is very dense with great information. And we want you to have it. It's totally free. So you go to writeforkids.org/ultimate-cheat sheet, and you will be on our list, and you will have a very cool goodie. For those of you who don't know who we are the people who publish Children's Book Insider, the Children's Writing Monthly. It is a monthly newsletter that comes with interviews with top authors and editors and agents, and all sorts of deep writing craft advice and fresh market news in terms of publishers and agents and contests. So that's all included. And also above the slush pile codes that allows you to submit to publishers that are perhaps not taking submissions, or if they are, it puts you at the very top of the slush pile. You can see on a particular issue you're looking at, Doubleday was that month's above the slush pile code. And you also get access to the CBI Clubhouse, which you see behind it, where we have a giant library of information for children's writers and tons of videos and courses and webinars. It can take you months to work your way through that. But you get that all, and it's only $5 a month. And the new issue is coming out in a couple of days. So if you sign up now, you'll get the August issue, and then you'll get the brand new one. And you can cancel it anytime. It's just $5 a month. writeforkids.org/CBI. And I think my job is done. And here comes Laura. Have a great time, everybody.
Hello, everybody. Thanks for being here tonight. Normally on this slide, it says, where in the world is Laura? And then I have I show you my backdrop and you have to guess where I am in the world. But I had some of you send me in slides of you, and I'm very excited. So this week we get to feature one of you. So here is Marie Sontag, and clearly she's on some sort of national historic trail, but can you guess where this trail might be? And then I'm going to tell you the book connection that no, it's not in San Antonio. Anybody else want to guess where this trail might be? That Tennessee? No. I know it's hard. There's not a whole lot of clues. Oh, you're so close. I saw someone, Robert Louis Stevenson Park. No. Washington, D.C., no. New Salem, Illinois, no. You're getting in the right area of the country. Pennsylvania. Marlena says Mark Twain. You're getting really close. It's really hard to guess this one. But I am going to tell you, because this is very cool. Trail of Tears. No, Susan, but good guess. This is the road in Independence, Missouri, where the wagon trains started from to take the Oregon-California Trail. And her middle grade historical fiction book, California Trail Discovered, comes out October 14th. And Marie and her husband are currently driving this trail from Missouri to Fort Bridger in Wyoming, stopping where the characters in her book stopped all along the trail. So isn't that a really cool road trip? I just think that's so cool. So thank you, Marie, for sending us that. and congrats on your book coming out in October. And she said, this is the first book in a series. Book 2 should come out sometime next year. Great. So when you do that trail on that book, send us another picture. That's very, very cool. So this is Marie Got It. Marie got what I want you to do. I want you to send me pictures of yourself in front of a literary landmark or somewhere that inspires your writing or doing something writing related, and email me a brief description of where you are and send me the picture as a JPEG. And we will feature you on another Distancing Social because we love to see you. You get to see us every week. We want to start seeing you. So you can email it to me at mail@writeforkids.org and put "where in the world" in the subject line. So I look forward to seeing your pictures. Okay, now we get to do our really cool celebrate section. I have some good ones this week. This is where we celebrate the successes and accomplishments of our people. So Debbie Chardoff's post, "The Right Purpose," was featured on the Passion Project blog. You can see the link there, passion-project.com/blog, in which she describes how her love of writing inspired her project, The Note Connection, that connects pen pals with people who are sheltered or isolated during the pandemic. And that's just an awesome project. And she said it's going really well. And there's a private Facebook page connected with that Note Connection project. And if you're interested in participating, you could go to Facebook. Just get on Facebook and Google The Note Connection or search for The Note Connection and ask to join that group. And, you can participate in the Note Connection. But I think that's just a wonderful idea of creating pen pals for people who can't leave their house during this pandemic. And a lot of them are elderly people, and getting letters will make their day. Okay, Cheryl, I hope I say your name right. Kramarcizic, I hope that's close, reports that she used Manuscript Magic from our Writing Blueprints site to finish the story level edits on her third manuscript, and said, in this current novel, I only needed to work on 4 major story level edits instead of everything. So yay, Cheryl. And she says, trust the process, don't give up, and keep writing. It's true. The more you work through the edits, the more your writing will improve. Mine did. So yay, Cheryl. Good for you to see that amazing progress. You only had to do 4 big picture edits. And then, of course, what she did after this was move on to scene level edits and then sentence level edits, which is how we teach it in Manuscript Magic. But that is awesome that you saw your work improve so much. Melissa Berry Gratias says, during the early days of quarantine, the Captain Corona and the 19 COVID Warriors team wrote, edited, illustrated, published, and started promoting our book in only 10 days. And you can go to this link that is on your screen and download. It's a free ebook called Captain Corona and the 19 COVID Warriors, and it is for kids, and it is about all the helpers that are helping during the pandemic. So Melissa, congrats on that, and good work getting that out in 10 days. So publishers that take 4 years, what's your problem? No, we know why it takes so long, but good for you, Melissa. Okay, so I want to hear your good news. Oh yes, Robin is saying, usually I am bigger. I will, when I stop sharing the slides, you'll see me. And I don't know why my thumbnail's looking so small on your computer tonight. It looks the same size on mine, so I'm sorry about that. But at some point when David and I are on together, we'll stop sharing the slides. You'll see both of us nice and big. Anyway, send us your good news, mail@writeforkids.org, and put celebrate in the subject line, and we'll feature you on a Distancing Social. And I want to hear about everything you're doing, every little step along the way, from getting a great idea to getting your book published. We want to celebrate all of that with you. Okay. Robin, it could be that you don't have your screen enlarged properly. I can't control that on my end. You need to click the little box at the top of your window to enlarge the whole thing. It's just like any other window. So, okay. So now we're going to take a poll. We do this every week. And since we have a poet on tonight, our poll is, who's your favorite children's poet? Present company excluded. Now, of course, there's a lot of really amazing children's poets out there. We've put together a handful here, but I want to hear from this group, who is your favorite? We have A.A. Milne, Nikki Giovanni, Marilyn Singer, Jack Perlutsky, Kwame Alexander, Shel Silverstein, Jane Yolen. All amazing poets. And part of what I like to do in these polls is to maybe throw out some names of writers that you might not have heard of, especially if you're just kind of new to the children's book field. So Kwame Alexander, his book, The Undefeated, won a Caldecott this year, was the Caldecott winner. He wrote it. The illustrator, Kadir Nelson, won the Caldecott for the illustrations. This book started out as a poem. It was written as a poem, not as a book, and then it got turned into an amazing picture book. Kwame is an amazing poet. He writes all kinds of books in poetry. He's quite the talent, so you should definitely check him out. Okay, so we're gonna, I see you're rapidly voting. I'll give you 5 more seconds. 4, 3, 2, and 1. And I will share the results. As I predicted, Shel Silverstein won. I can't argue with that. But as I said, everybody on here is an amazing poet. So if you're interested in poetry and you haven't heard of some of these people, make note of their names. Go check them out. You will read some incredible poetry. Okay. Okay, links of interest. Again, every week we do some links that I've sort of gathered from around the web and stuff that I thought you might be interested in. So, and I'm sorry, some of my links, I made them blue and then they turn unblue on the slide. So I've talked a lot about Nathan Bransford's blog. He's got an amazing blog and he has a lot of really good, solid writing tips in his posts. So the one this week, third person omniscient versus limited versus head jumping, talks about point of view. And it's really good. And as he explains, because he was a literary agent for a long time, he's also a writer. Now he does editorial critiques. And he talks about, this is a comment he makes on a lot of manuscripts, that you're not keeping the viewpoints consistent. And when I've critiqued manuscripts, I've noticed the same thing quite often. So this really helps you understand what these 3 things are in third person. If you're writing third person, first person point of view is pretty easy to figure out. Third person often kind of messes people up. And he gives you a really good example of each one. And he talks about why you shouldn't do certain things in your book because it will confuse the reader. So that's a great, and I made a bit.ly link, bit.ly/POV explained. POV for point of view, explained. Okay, Bookends Literary Agency. I've talked about their YouTube channel before. They have a great video that came up this week called How to Use Art Notes in Picture Books. That's a question a lot of picture book writers have. Can I put art notes on my manuscript? When is it okay? When is it not okay? This video explains this. James McGowan, the agent, gives his opinions and tips for when it's all right and when it's not. So that's a really good video for all you picture book writers to watch. Again, I made a bit.ly link, bit.ly/art notes in manuscripts. You can also just go to YouTube and type in Bookends Literary Agency, and their whole channel will come up and you will find this video. It's the most recent one. It's really good. Okay, oh, sorry. For those of you who are self-publishing and considering creating an audiobook, audiobooks are huge right now. Audiobooks, ebooks are really the hottest selling element of publishing right now for obvious reasons. Most of us are at home a lot. And so not able to get out and get the physical books from the stores. And so creating an audiobook from your self-published book is a great idea, but it can be very expensive to do, and it has to be done right. So there's a company called Podium Audio, and they actually take submissions from self-published authors and pick books that they think are going to make great audiobooks, and they will finance, develop, produce, and distribute the audiobook. So you will get paid a royalty as this is similar to as if you had a traditional publisher and they created the audiobook. But they do amazing stuff. They get first-rate actors, first-rate production. They kind of made their name by creating the audiobook for Andy Weir's The Martian, which was a self-published book. And they sort of recognized that this was going to be a big commercial success and created that audiobook before it even became, you know, a huge international phenomenon and movie. So the majority of their clients are self-published through Amazon's KDP platform. So they do want the book to be self-published first. It can be an ebook format, but there's a link on their website, podiumaudio.com, that you can go find out information on how to submit to them. They, as far as children's books go, they do young adult. They're not doing younger than that at this point, which kind of makes sense because audiobooks tend to be more the older audience. And they specialize in science fiction, fantasy, mystery, thriller, romance, nonfiction, and YA. Stuff with a real commercial appeal to it. So if you go take a look at their site, if you feel your book fits, you can submit to them and see what happens. And they specialize in these subgenres of fantasy and sci-fi. And if you don't know what they are, don't worry about it. They're all sort of game-oriented, video game-oriented characters and that kind of thing. Okay. All right. Now I get to introduce my guest. So I know we have a lot of David Harrison fans here tonight. So a lot of you already know who he is. And he has done so much in his long, illustrious career that I can't even begin to start telling you everything tonight. So you'll have to go on his website and read his bio. But his 90th through 100th books come out in 2020. 2 for classroom teachers and 2 for trade. His poetry has inspired plays, been set to music, sandblasted into a library sidewalk, and painted on a bookmobile. He holds 2 science degrees and 2 honorary doctorates of letters. He is Drury University's Poet Laureate. David Harrison Elementary School in Springfield, Missouri was named after him. How cool is that? That's, to me, that's just one of the coolest of all the accomplishments. And his newest book, which is coming out in September, is co-authored with Jane Yolen, Rum Pum Pum, and we're going to talk about that. So David, I'm going to bring you on, and then I'm going to show 2 more slides because, you know, you can't fit on one slide. I told him I'd turn on his camera for him. I need my my Zoom to cooperate here. Okay, so I hope I can. Oh, you know what? I have to ask to unmute. I'm going to have to stop sharing my slides to do that for you, David. So let me go through the 2 more slides first, and then I'll bring you on. I know you're there. He was recently chosen to receive the first Laura Ingalls Wilder Children's Literature Medal for his body of work, alongside Nashville artist Higgins Bond, who's an amazing illustrator. The award will be presented at the Laura Ingalls Wilder Children's Literature Festival in Mansfield, Missouri in November. And that medal, I believe you told me, David, you can confirm when you come on, was designed by the same company that does the Caldecott medal, I believe. Isn't that lovely? And finally, this is a fun one. David sent me an email this morning and said, I'm being auctioned off. Of course you are, because you have nothing else to do. So he's raising money for the Foundation for Springfield Public Schools, and you can buy David. He will provide a 30-minute Zoom session for the highest bidder. The session can be a reading of his work, a presentation of for a program, a visit with students to talk about writing, or perhaps a Q&A chat with adults interested in writing for children. And the winner also receives personalized signed copies of David's 4 books published in 2020. So that is a deal. So if you are interested in getting a half hour of David, either for your classroom or for yourself, I created a bit.ly link, bit.ly/by David Harrison. And you can go there and get the details. Okay, so I'm going to stop sharing, and so I can bring David on. Come on. Oh, come on. Okay, I might have to get John in here. John. There we go. You did it. Yay.
Did I do it?
You did it.
Okay.
I was having trouble on my end.
I'm gonna hit one more thing here.
Oh, I don't know if you should.
I probably shouldn't. But I'm seeing you, but I'm seeing a lot of other stuff on my screen.
Like what?
Telling me how to go about getting on this. Just
Oh,
background.
you probably have some background stuff open. Yeah. Okay. Well, if it's distracting, see if you can close it. Just try not to disappear on us.
Okay. Hold your breath. Here I go. Hey.
Yay. Okay. Well, welcome, David, to the Distancing Social. Thank you for being here.
Well, thank you. Can you see? I can see you.
Yep. I can see you.
Are you
just
seeing
fine.
me?
Yep. We can see you. We can hear you. It's great.
Now I'm looking at something that says Zoom. Just great big. I'm still out there, am I?
You're here. You're fine. We can see you just fine. And I have to tell you, we got an email from one of our subscribers, and I think her name was Sharon, earlier today, saying she had seen a YouTube video of an interview with you, and you inspired her so much, she sat down and wrote 2 poems this afternoon.
Oh. Well, way to go, Sharon.
Yeah, so wasn't that great? Wasn't that great? So first of all, congratulations on your newest award, the Laura Ingalls Wilder Children's Literature Medal, and being the first recipient. That is awesome. So tell us a little bit about that. So this was the Literature Festival is putting this on. Is that correct?
Well, it's an event sponsored really by the Laura Ingalls Wilder Home and Museum. It's the whole complex, which is headquartered there in Mansfield, Missouri, where Laura lived for the most of her adulthood and wrote her books. So it's a very nice museum. It's a chance to see her home. And I think something like 30,000 people a year make the trip to Mansfield, Missouri from all over the world to do that. Mm-hmm. So they decided to create this children's literature festival, and I was just delighted that they chose to honor me in this way with their first ever medal. Mm-hmm. And as you mentioned, yes, the medal, well, it was designed by an artist named Ron Sanders, and it's being minted by Metalcraft Mint, which makes the Peabody and the Caldecott and another big one or two. Mm-hmm. So it'll be well done, and I'm eager to get my hands on it.
Of course. Do you have like a trophy case in your house with all your awards?
Well, they're scattered and in boxes in some cases, but
Someone has to dust them all, right? At some point.
yeah, that's why we have children, so they can deal with this later.
Yeah, there you go. So your book coming out in September, you're collaborating with Jane Yolen, which is great. How does that work when you collaborate? Especially the two of you are such luminaries and such amazing writers. I mean, is it easy for you to share the writing with someone like that?
Well, let me ask you, when I'm looking at you, you're up here in the corner. Should I be looking straight into the screen because I'm looking at this big Zoom, but I want to know where my audience is.
Well, wherever your webcam is on your computer, which is usually kind of in the middle of the top edge of the computer.
Okay.
So
I'm talking to you then. All right. Well,
yeah, that's fine.
About 12, maybe 11 years ago, I hired Kathy Teeman, Temean, to create a website for me. I didn't have one, and all the big kids did, and I was feeling left out. So I thought, well, I don't want to be the odd one out. I need a website. And looking around, I found Kathy, and she's just a wonderful person in many ways, and including her talent to create websites. So she did that, and I'm still very proud of it. And I hope you all will go look at it and sign my guest book. But when Kathy finished the website, she said, "Now, my dear, you need a blog." And I said, "I don't even like the sound of the word. I don't think somebody needs to call it something else, and I don't want to have a blog." And she said, "Well, you really do have to have one." So Kathy created a blog. I said, "I don't know what to do with the blog." And so she said, "Well, here, it's easy." And she wrote something and said, "Now, tomorrow it's your turn." I've been doing that now and posting. I'm a slave to it now. And every day I post, almost every day I post something. And most mornings I sit down and type, "Hi, everyone," and then just wonder what I'm going to say. And sometimes not much of value comes out, and then once in a while something that interests other people, seems to anyway, comes out. And somewhere along the line, I also began creating something called Word of the Month. And we can talk more about that later, but during the course of that, I began to talk more about myself. I finally thought, well, I may be boring people to death, but it is my blog and it's supposed to be about me, I guess. So much of the time anyway, I do. On one occasion, I was talking about my son, Jeff, who, when he was maybe 6, begged me to write a book about a tiger for him. He wanted a tiger story. Well, it wasn't that I wasn't willing, but the world is full of tiger stories, and I always had something else to do. So years passed, and I mentioned that on my blog one morning. That poor Jeff was still waiting for his tiger story, and Jay, I guess Jane popped up, Yolen, and made some comment about the tiger story, and I responded, and she responded, which is something we frequently do. From time to time, she will write a poem in response to whatever I posted that day. If it strikes me right, I will respond by writing a poem right then too, and then she may respond with a poem back. And on occasion, Sue Hutchins, I know you're out there, I think you are, and others will say something to the fact that they're doing it again. And so people start piling on to see what's going to happen with Jane and David. So we just have a lot of fun playing, and we both write quickly. So on that particular occasion, she and I began to trade thoughts about tigers. And pretty soon she said, I think we're writing a book. Maybe we ought to get offline and get serious about this. And so this book that eventually became Rum Pum Pum was an accident, a spark from an old guilt trip of mine for Jeff. And so when we started offline then, I would write a page, or she would, and then we would sort of intuit what the other was doing. And we didn't have a roadmap, we didn't have an outline. We just two old writers and friends writing. And what came out is something that we both are proud of, and we love the artwork. My gosh, well, can I show you?
Yes, please.
Can you see that from where I'm holding it?
Yeah, hold it a little higher. You might need to slide back a little from the computer because it's, yeah, so we can see the whole thing. Yeah, there we go. Yeah, that's very beautiful. Mm-hmm.
Well, the artist lives in Sheffield, England. Anjan, I'm not sure how to pronounce Ajan, and his last name is Sarkar, Sarkar, and he is just wonderful. So we're delighted with it, and it comes out September 15th. So we are getting ready to start promoting Rum Pum Pum.
That is great. That is great. I want to keep talking about that, but there were two useful things in the chat box here. First of all, Sue Hutchins says, I'm here, I'm listening, yay. So she said hi.
Hey, Sue.
We have a suggestion from one of our listeners about the screen you're seeing that says Zoom on it. You might be able to slide it out of the way. It's our videos are probably right behind it.
Well, it's not wanting to slide.
Is it white with the word Zoom in blue on it?
Uh-huh.
Yeah. That's something that you can, or you can minimize it with the little minimize up in the top corner of it, where you click on that and it gets smaller.
Okay, now I've got you just sitting in the middle of my screen.
Okay. Well.
I really do need a helper on this, but.
All right. Well, as long as you're okay with that, we're fine.
Well, now I'm looking at a picture of my wife and me in Greece, so that probably isn't appropriate for this, but
probably the Zoom got minimized down at the bottom. Then you need to click on it. So if you're okay, just to continue like this, we're fine.
Okay.
So we were talking about collaborating, and I imagine, and I know you've collaborated on more than one book. I imagine you have to kind of take your ego a little bit out of it, because it is not your book at this point, it's our book.
Correct.
And I do you think that's easy to do, or is it something you just, years and years of writing, you've kind of gotten to that point?
Well, not all partnerships are the same. You approach each one according to your relationship with your writing partner, what makes you both most comfortable. Some move more quickly than others. I have one that's sort of cookie on the back burner with somebody now. That's been on the back burner for quite some time. Eventually, I'm sure it will move forward, but neither of us is in any hurry. That's the case in a couple of others, actually. And whereas with to use Jane again for an example, Jane writes quickly. She wants to do it right now, and I do too, because we both think that way.
Right.
Whereas the next partner might be very, very sensitive, and you need to be kind of careful about how you word your responses. And others, they just want a good book. If you don't like what I just read, tell me so. There'll be an alternative. Let's do something. So what I find about collaboration is it's exciting.
Mhm.
It does add another dimension for sure of how you approach what you're doing, and you have to sort of learn how the other one feels. You know,
Mhm.
there's an element of trust, and to trust someone, you need to feel like you know that person enough to kind of know where you are with him or her, and vice versa.
Sure. Sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. By the way, Jeff is said in the chat box, I'm thrilled to finally get my tiger story. He said,
Well,
Jeff
Jeff, I'm
Harrison.
sorry. I'm sorry it took a while, hon, but it's there.
Awesome. We have one more suggestion from a viewer on how to fix your screen, David. Have David click on the blue Zoom camera icon at the bottom. So along your taskbar, there'll be a little blue icon for Zoom. And sometimes if you hover your mouse over there, you'll see the right window pop up to click on. Did that make any sense at all to you?
Yes, but I'm seeing it, but it just isn't cooperating.
Okay, well,
Well, I'm sorry about this.
that's all right. It doesn't bother me. I'm fine.
Okay.
As long as you're okay. Ooh,
What did I do?
Hmm?
Are we okay?
We're good.
Okay.
All right.
I'll stop messing with this thing, and we'll just live with it.
Yeah. So you talked about on your blog that you put out word of the month poetry prompts, and you also had another interesting thing you talk about on your blog about doing word associations as sort of a way to get ideas for poems. So talk about that a little bit, about those word associations.
Well, I did a book with Mary Jo Fresh, who's a professor emeritus from the Ohio State University, on phonemes and teaching young people to use and think about words based on a single sound. So this wasn't even a whole word, it was just the sound that combinations of letters make. And I wrote 96 poems for that book. And in each case began with a single sound. Ah, or ch, whatever. And to move forward, I had to first find similar sound, the same sound, in other words, make a list, begin to look through those words, trying to find anything that I could possibly combine in some way to make a rhyming poem that would tell a story.
Mm-hmm.
And that one was a challenge, but it reminded me that words are just magical. They're just, there's so many stories, even in a sound.
Right.
And so that was starting from scratch. Now in the word association, you're working with a whole word. And I just make a list. I take a single word, coyote, and right below that, just start a column of things that coyote reminds me of: sneaky, survivor, carnivore, shaggy, wild, ancient, and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, when you finish that column, then pick any one of those that strikes your fancy. Ancient. Start a second column. Under ancient, Methuselah, granite, oceans, cosmos, me, and so on. Then choose one of those words. I'll choose cosmos. Start a third column. Under cosmos, what does that make you think of? Heavens, stars, space, unending, and so on. Now, if you do 10 in each of those three columns within a very short time, you have 30, I won't call them ideas exactly, but 30 things, 30 images that you have just had based on the association that began with coyote. And so I may wind up writing about a black hole in space, and it began with coyote. But that's how the mind works and how association works. So if you're stumped for something to write about, or you're with students or someone else who's having that same problem, try that. And you don't have to do 30, you could do fewer than that or more than that. But it's just another way of getting going.
Yeah, yeah, I love it. I love it. Do you think if someone wants to really become a skilled poet, do they need to study the different forms of poetry and master them, or do they need to just start writing and play with the words?
I tell people that to get started, they need to pick up a pencil and get started, or pick up a keyboard, as the case may be. But that's just to get started. You do need to study. There are wonderful books on the market, new ones as well as old ones, on the art, the craft of writing poetry. The more you know about poetry, the more you realize that there are nuances that purists and experts and old salts talk about. They dissect and then dissect and dissect, and in some cases you'll find some rather vitriolic arguments among poets about what this is and what it represents and isn't necessary and so on. But that will pull you down if you try to worry about stuff like that. Not now. If you try poetry and you get some things down and then you start wondering what you've done, then you can look at a book and you can see if you just wrote a couplet or a ballad or a limerick or whatever. And so I think writing comes first, but the knowledge has to grow accordingly. And there's an old adage, you shouldn't break a rule if you don't know you're breaking it. And so if you begin writing and then discover some rules, and you can begin to inform your writing by rules that you realize are there now. If for some reason you need to stretch or crack or break or chip a rule a little bit, at least you know you're doing it. It's not a work of amateurism, it's a work of professionalism. And so first the writing, then learn some rules, then learn what works and what doesn't work for you. But sooner or later you have to know what you're doing enough to at least follow the basic tenets of writing poetry.
Right. And I imagine different poems have different purposes. Some tell a story, some capture a moment in time, some are really about a feeling. So is the form you choose important depending on the purpose of your poem?
Yes, it is. The tone of your poem is shaped subtly, subliminally in some cases, by the length of the words you're using, the number of accented syllables in a line, the number of stanzas, the sounds of those words, the cadence that you choose. There are all those subtleties that go into creating a mood for your poem. So if your poem is lighthearted, silly, funny, several of you just voted for Silverstein and Proletsky, and those are two masters of taking an animal or a situation and making fun, having fun with it. A lot of the words and the cadence in poems written by those two guys and many others who write humorously will be shorter, quick cadence, rhymes that are strong and grab you and let you go. And sometimes they're pretty short poems. Whereas if you're more serious, or everybody has, feels like a nut sometimes, but we also have our serious moments, sad moments. We've lost a pet or something's happened in our lives, or we're just simply writing about history. And sometimes history isn't all that funny, so we just have to write the way it is. So everything you write about needs to sound like what you're writing about. And a lot of that is just how you play with the words. Frost said poetry is a word game. Mm-hmm. Indeed, that's what it is. And the more you get into it, the more you realize that there's always going to be just that right word for what you want to say, with the right length, with the right sound. And very often you get to the end of a line if you're writing verse, and you realize that you've just written yourself into a corner because you can't find another word to rhyme with it.
Right.
Well, okay, what do? Well, you don't make it rhyme. It just screams at the reader. You start over. That's what you do. You find another way of saying what you meant to say. And so that happens to me over and over and over and over, having to just throw out much of a poem, even though I liked that poem, but I couldn't make it finish right. So I have to throw it out and start again and find some other way of saying or getting at what I want to say.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. What is it like having your poetry edited? I imagine it's for an editor to say, does an editor say this word's not working for me? And you have to then start over?
There are editors who are rather curious about why you've said something, or they challenge. Mm-hmm. Most editors with whom I've worked are not dictatorial about it. If you have a good reason, if you can defend it, in most cases that suffices. Mm-hmm. But a good editor is a godsend when he or she finds something that you hadn't thought about, and why didn't I do that in the first place? So I really enjoy intelligent response and input and the chance to talk back and forth. The poem is what benefits, and I don't care what I get over it if I get my feelings burned a little bit, but that rarely happens. It happened more often when I was earlier into my career.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Now, a lot of your collections are, you have nonfiction books that around a certain topic, like, A Place to Start a Family, poems about creatures that build, or one of your new ones, After Dark, poems about nocturnal animals. So you have a topic, you have facts that you have to stick to in your poems. I imagine that is a huge challenge as a poet to then have to work that information into the poetry format.
Well, it is, but as you mentioned earlier, I have a couple of degrees in biology, science, and a lifelong passion for animals, the outdoors, nature. I'm constantly observing. I guess all writers do, but what I observe tends to be the squirrel in the tree and the butterfly just went by and that sort of thing. So it's fairly natural. It's very natural for me to write about nature, to write about animals. And therefore, I from a lifetime of reading about them, watching them, and writing about them, it may be a little bit easier for me than for someone who doesn't have this particular background
Mhm.
to pick out what I want to say about any particular animal that's my subject. Because when you're researching, naturally you do a lot of reading rather. Even though I may know my subject rather well, I still start from scratch and make sure that I'm not overlooking something, or that maybe some new information has come in from somebody somewhere that I don't know about. And so I wind up with pages and pages of notes or excerpts from books and whatnot. Then the question is, well, you can't tell them everything. What are you going to say? What are you going to talk about?
Mhm.
But there again, Laura, is where a good editor comes in, because sometimes an editor, well, Karen Boss, for example, and I guess it was in Now You See Them, Now You Don't. She said, come on, you're going to have to be consistent with what the message. What are you going to tell these people about each of these animals that's in common?
Mhm.
And what are you going to not worry about? And so you have to focus on that and finally choose the salient information that you're going to go with. And that becomes the hook, as editors like to call it, the reason for being, and the interest level, the reason for the interest in the book to get kids to want to read it.
Mhm. Do you find that poetry anthologies in general by a single author, if they have that hook, that they're more apt to sell and have a market for them?
Oh boy. um, I don't know. I think a good anthologist can certainly produce a book that people will enjoy. I don't know how anthologies sell in general compared to single author
Right.
books. I don't. I guess I've
Mhm.
never thought about that. I'd like to write alone. I love these collaborations when they come along, but by nature I like to sit by myself and be in my own thoughts. And I'm here at my keyboard where you see me now,
Mhm.
each weekday at 6 o'clock, and work till 1 o'clock. And I'm a happy guy when I'm able to have blocks of time where I can really get into my thoughts and my subject.
Mhm.
Um, so I think if I'm personally just writing a book and it has 24 poems in it, or 18 or whatever, there's more likely a smoother continuity from the beginning to the end. And every book has, well, almost every book has a beginning, middle, and end. There's, nonfiction books still have that arc, because even if you know what happened, even if we're writing about history and we already know how it turned out, there still has to be something to begin, something to kick it off. And somehow you wind up where you need to go, but there has to be a story of some sort, an arc in there
Mhm.
somewhere. And I think that's true of a body of poems. They just have to flow, and it may be artificial in some cases. And in some of my books, it'll be, um, the animals will be grouped. Those that fly, those that dig, those that do this, those that do that, but at least some reason,
Mhm. Mhm. Have teachers told you that they use those books in classrooms?
Oh yeah.
Good.
Yes, I've been very, very happy with comments from teachers in this country and in other countries too. I love to hear from people in other countries telling me that they have enjoyed my work and have been
Great.
able to use it. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. I imagine your poetry has not been translated into other languages, because that's very difficult to do with poetry.
Well, it has been,
Hmm.
but since I don't speak the other languages, I'm not sure what they sound like.
You don't know how good a job they did.
But of course, my prose has been translated quite a bit.
Yes. Yes. let's talk about your prose. So not
Okay.
everything you write is in poetry because, 100 books, I mean,
Yeah.
come on, right?
Yeah.
So have you found, do you feel you are first and foremost a poet? Is that sort of how you identify, or are you just a writer and whatever form the story needs is what you do?
I began as a storyteller.
Mm.
I loved and still do to write fiction. I like to make up a good old-fashioned story that'll entertain.
Mhm.
And probably almost half of my books have been stories. Somewhere along the line, I decided that my stories were getting stale. I was running out of freshness, and I needed to develop a um, second kind of writing, a second genre. So I had already been writing nonfiction, but I began to focus more on nonfiction. And that sort of rejuvenated me and got me flowing again. And after a few years, I hit the same situation where I thought, I'm not as excited as I was, and maybe it's time for something else. And so I had been thinking about writing poetry for 25 years. And I'd read a lot of poetry. I'd been reading about how to write poetry, but I had never committed to writing poems, poems for
Mhm.
publication. So I was in my 50s when I finally got around to that.
Hmm.
And the first book that came out was Kirkus starred review, and it was in its third printing by the third month or something like that. And I thought, well, that's kind of fun. I think I'll do that again. So I soon discovered that although I love every book while I'm working on it, and I love the nonfiction and I love the fiction, but boy, oh boy, do I like to write poetry. And partly it's because I was a musician growing up, and I have a sense of musicality that sometimes gets me in trouble because I play Dixieland and jazz and as well as symphonic music. And if you get into dance bands and some of that, you get into syncopation and moving ahead and falling behind and all that. Well, I tend to write that way if I'm not careful. And so occasionally I'll reread my poem and think, well, I get it, but I don't know if anybody else would because it's kind of like fractured rhythm.
Right.
Nevertheless, I have a wonderful time writing poetry. So today, I think I may be best known as a poet, and I'm fine with that. But as you suggested, in my heart, I'm a writer, and I follow the idea or the request. And after I'd done my fiction and then moved on to nonfiction and then moved on to poetry a few years later, I moved on to educational books for the classroom. And so now I've done the two of these that are coming out this year, I think will be my 14th and 15th book, all of which have been co-authored because I don't have the classroom credentials. So I have to and enjoy writing with a professor or a teacher. So that's my fourth genre, and I'm ready for whatever happens next. Whatever it is, I'm ready.
Graphic novels.
Oh, I spoke too soon. I haven't come to terms yet with graphic novels. I know they're extremely popular, and I'm not sure I'm up for them. But
It's a very specific kind of writing, I think, and
yeah,
you're
I think
either
so too.
good at it or you're not. So,
But when I was 7 years old, I wrote my first graphic novel. Come to think of it, because in those days, I was a budding artist. I thought I was going to be an artist, and that didn't happen. But I was good enough at it to where I could write my own comic books. pow, gotcha, and all that. Lots of.
Yeah.
So I can remember what was probably a pass for a graphic novel.
Yeah. Yeah.
At a young age.
My son started creating comic books at about the same age, and he actually is an artist, so it can happen. But yeah, he created his own too, right around
Yep.
7, 8 years old, he started doing it. Yep. Yep.
Sure. Well, maybe there's still hope for me. I don't know.
There is, you know. So you talked about feeling like you're a slave to your blog, but
Mhm.
it is a wonderful blog, and I'm going to show a slide here. I hope you don't despair when I start sharing my screen.
Okay.
We'll hope for the best. I'm going to advance to the next slide. So I can see you, David. Can you see the slide here? I've got one of your poems up.
Yes, I can't read it. It's very small. I
Okay.
wish it were bigger, but I can see it. Yeah.
I can read it. I won't read it as well as you do, I'm sure. But so basically what you do on your blog is every month you put out a word to inspire people as a prompt to write a
Mhm.
poem. And then you write a poem with the word, and then you invite people to paste their own poems in the
Mhm.
comments.
Right.
And I love that because you get a lot of great poetry from your readers
Mhm.
on your blog, some really good stuff. And I think it creates this wonderful sense of community that you're all writing together on the
Mhm.
same word.
I agree.
Now, one question I was going to ask you is some people are reluctant to post their work online. They're afraid it's going to get stolen and
Yeah.
you post a lot of stuff online, a lot of poems that you just put up there.
Sure.
So are you ever worried about anything like that, about it getting taken or?
No, if in doubt, you can always, at the bottom of your poem, write copyright 2020,
Right.
Sue Hutchins, and all rights reserved. So you have some proof, of course, hopefully in your own notes that you indeed wrote the poem. And then because it's been posted, you've reserved all rights. It doesn't stop you from moving ahead and using it in any way you want to. It's your
Sure.
poem. And at the end of each month, I erase them all anyway. They're gone. They're not on. I can only keep 1 month at a time.
Yeah.
So there's a minimum amount of risk involved, if any. I don't think there's any. And Jane does the same thing when Yolan posts a poem, and or anybody else who visits my blog and does that, you'll frequently see them add that protection at the bottom, and
Right.
it doesn't hurt to do that.
Mhm.
I've been told that it's probably not necessary, but it makes you feel good, so do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Have you ever posted a poem on your blog and then ended up using it in a published work?
Sure, yeah.
And publishers didn't have a problem that it was posted at one point?
No, if I remember to tell them, I'm not sure I did, but it's happened on occasion that somebody wound up putting it in a journal or a magazine. Sure, that's fine.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Um,
Oh, there's one coming out. Well, it just came out, as a matter of fact, in the SCBWI.
I have that on another slide. We're going to show
Oh,
that
okay.
to you
All right. We'll just wait for that slide
because
then.
I love that poem. So I'm not going to read this because you've all probably read it yourself on the screen, but if anybody wants to read this poem or David's other poems on his blog, you can go to his blog and you can even do a search. How do you call it? Monthly prompt, or I'm trying to
Well,
remember.
it's the word of the month
Word,
poetry a word challenge.
word
And
of the month word challenge, and there's a little
yeah,
tab along the top of your blog. You can click right to it.
yeah, there are
Yeah.
two of them. One is the adult word of the month, and a little bit farther over to the right is the young poets word of the month.
Right.
And when I first started this goes back before uh, Common Core and all children, no child left behind and so on.
Hmm.
Several convulsions back in the educational flow of things. I used to get teachers from all over the place posting their students' poems, and it was wonderful. I just
Hmm.
loved it. And the adults who follow my blog would get on that part of my post and brag on these kids and encourage and support them. And their teachers would report back to me that their kids were 10 feet tall when they had people telling them how, thank you for writing your poem and thank you for sharing it. And it was just a huge tonic for these kids. And in one case, a teacher who taught high school kids who were uh, a bit behind in their development, and they didn't have many successes in their lives. And this teacher said, you just made all the difference in the world for these young people.
I bet, yeah.
Yeah, but time passes. Teachers no longer see how they can find the time to do that. So today, if I get a poem submitted by a teacher of one of her kids or his kids, I'm just thrilled because it's so rare. So
Mhm.
almost nobody uses it, but it's there. And I just keep hoping that the pendulum will go back the other way one of these days and we'll
Sure.
start being able to encourage young people. I have two young women now, both in college, who grew up doing that. They were fourth graders when they first started posting on my
Oh,
blog, and I'm
wow.
still in touch with them. They still get in touch with me.
That's great.
Anyway, back over to the adult side. The word of the month changes each month, and the idea is to just take that one word, like I did a while ago with the association, take that one word and really think about it. And don't just jump at the first thing that comes to mind because that's probably not the best thing. There are so many things inside a word, so many ways you can go with it. And instead of focusing just on the word, you can write a whole poem about something else that somehow or another concludes with that word. And that's what I did with Sparkle recently. Um,
Hmm.
so it's a great exercise, and it's not meant to produce publishable poetry, although it frequently does. I mean, there,
Hmm.
as you said, there's some darn good poems that are published, or rather posted on my blog, and
Hmm.
then others talk about them and give them attaboys and attagirls, and it's a great family feeling, and I just
It
love it.
is.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's great. And I think it's such a brilliant social media technique. I don't know if you meant to use it as a way to widen your fan base, but I think it's
Well,
working beautifully.
well, yes, I agree, but no, it was. I just was looking around one day trying to think what in the world to say. I had written hi everyone. No, that came out.
Yeah, that's great. Well, let me get to a few questions here before we let you go, because I know it's later where you are.
That's all right.
Sharon says you did an interview about 7 years ago where you mentioned how publishers were putting a lot of weight in choosing books that fit into the Common Core standards
Mhm.
and the curriculum needs. Do you feel that is still the case?
Yes, it has become embedded in the way editors and publishers uh, respond to the market these days. The school market is still an important one, and these days teachers and librarians do look for books that can be put to work in the classroom and in the library. It's harder today, I think, to just publish a book that's just good literature for young people.
Mhm.
That doesn't have a hook, except that it makes them want to read it again. And
Mhm.
to me, I'm more in the passing of that era in writing for children, when if you had something to say that was just good and
Right.
said well, you should be able to find a publisher. I'm not saying that you can't today, but I do
Mhm.
believe it's harder. And that's one reason why you see people like me writing about um, nonfiction science oriented or nonfiction social studies. Um, we follow the market, and
Yeah.
so that market has grown. That element in the market, I think, has grown, and I think it's here to stay for who knows how long, maybe
Mhm.
forever. And I'm
Right.
not saying that that's a bad thing, because um, kids have a lot to learn, and as other kinds of activities have taken over reading time for so many kids, about the only reading some of them ever get is if it's related to what they're studying. And
Mm.
so in a way, it's not all bad to have poetry about their class course curriculum, and at least they're reading something that way.
Right. Right. And within those parameters, you can be very creative, as you have proven with your nonfiction poetry.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. All right. Um, let's see. Okay, so this is a poetry form question. In addition to studying poetry form, what about internal rhyme or more of a poetic style to your writing, or a lyrical style than a specific form? Um, uh, and also she's asking, are there any specific books on poetry that you would recommend? I know there's a lot of good ones out there.
Yes, and I'm sorry to say I should have written some down to have in anticipating that question, but I did not, and so I do not. There are uh, lots of good books out there, and it's not hard to find them just going on a Google search. And I've written a little, but mostly for teachers teaching kids. Yeah, I wrote a book on how to write stories for Scholastic, but I don't have anything I can tell you to go to my work.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but poetry informs your other kinds of writing too, and my nonfiction has been accused of being free verse by more than one reviewer, because my prose tends to sound a little bit like poetry,
Mm-hmm.
and that's on purpose, I think, because after writing as much poetry as I do, then the tendency is to want to make those sentences, those lines in non-verse and prose really almost take on that same feeling.
Mm-hmm.
And so writing poetry certainly makes you a better writer, I think,
Mm-hmm.
in your prose. Um, there is a sense of lyrical quality to a lot of poetry, but not all. There is a sense of storytelling in some poetry, but not all.
Mm-hmm.
So there are certain categories of writing poems, and some people never get out of one. They're comfortable in that same one, and they stay there forever. I can't do that, and most of us do experiment with other kinds of poems.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Natasha asks, what's the difference between lyrical and poetic? Are they really different things, or are they kind of shades of the same
Well,
thing?
well, lyrical does have a musical quality to
Mhm.
it. Poetic, I think, applies to pretty much any poem that's done well. I don't think of it as quite the same thing as lyrical,
Right,
but
right. And lyrical could apply to prose, as you said. It has that
yeah.
flow, a certain flow, a certain
Mhm.
sound to it, but it's not rhyming. It's not,
Yeah,
you
right.
know,
And
written like
and good, and good verse. Sorry, good free verse
Mhm.
um, is very hard to write. But as a matter of fact, I didn't tackle free verse until I'd written, I think, three books of verse. But free verse is very musical too. When it all comes together, it's it's poetic.
It is. Yes. Yes. Um, is there a typical length for a children's poem? And also, is there any place for longer narrative poems for kids that tell a longer story in a
Well,
poem?
yeah. the verse novel is quite popular these days. You mentioned Kwame, and his first one out of the chute was a wonderful book. I haven't done one yet, but I think I will eventually because A, I'm a storyteller, and B, I'm a poet, so why not put them together? But on the other hand, for a typical poem for young people, unless you're telling a long story, usually they're shorter by a lot. I mean, maybe one stanza, one 4-line ballad for an awful lot of poems, maybe a couple of them, 8 lines, maybe 3 of them, 12 lines. But if you get much beyond 12, 16 lines in a poem for young people, you better have a lot to say. Maybe it's a certain form of poetry that requires longer lines, number of lines. But as a rule, we try to say what we're going to say and move on.
Right, right.
And by the way, that's one of the reasons why kids like poetry so much. And they like to laugh, and they like short lines, and it's easier to read. And
that's true. That's true. Well, and a picture book written in rhyme would almost be like a narrative poem because it's going to tell a story and have a beginning, middle, and end, and often be longer than a
there is a difference there too. Mm-hmm. Most of the rhyming picture books that we pick up are not poems. They're just simply
they're stories
rhyming,
in rhyme. Yeah,
just stories in rhyme. Occasionally there will be a really great poem that lends itself to an illustration, that has enough situations in it that it can support 32 pages. Mm-hmm. And the night before Christmas or something will come along and you can do that. Whereas it's very hard for most poems to be shown in book form.
Sure. And so there really is a difference between writing a longer poem and writing a picture book in rhyme. You're approaching the process completely differently.
Yes, absolutely. Because for one thing, you don't have to have a story particularly. You can just be telling a sequence of dogs and cats and how cute they are or whatever, and you can write couplets about each one, and you have a rhyme picture book.
Right. Well, and if people are confused on the difference, this book, The Undefeated, this is a poem, and then look at a rhyming picture book story and read them side by side, and you will see the difference right there. Yeah.
Good point.
And they both can make wonderful books. Like this is an amazing book, but it's a poem. It's not written as a story. Yeah. I'm just gonna one more question here because we kept you a lot longer than I anticipated. Thank you for hanging out with us tonight.
Well, I'm enjoying it. Thank you.
Yeah. Does children's poetry have to rhyme? Now you talked about free verse. Do you find that if you're targeting sort of the younger end of your audience, is rhyme better? Do they kind of expect rhyme more?
I think that's a fair statement. The little ones learn to read in part by having structured language, and it's easier to memorize, easier to recall something that rhymes. Mm-hmm. We all know that from the old commercials back in Burma Shave days.
Yes.
but so the little ones really do tend to like something that rhymes and it's short and they can dance to it if it's that kind of a poem. And if you give them a free verse, it isn't that you can't do it. It isn't that they won't like it, but you tend to use that as seasoning rather than the main dish. And in surveys that comes through too is that little ones like that rhyme. As you grow up through the grades, there's a tendency to move a little bit more toward free verse. For one thing, the older kids want more meat. They want more substance. And sometimes that free verse is the way to go. And they don't want pictures on every page. Thank you very much. I'm grown up now. And so free verse is a better vehicle to in that regard too.
Yeah, great, great. Well, to close out the evening, I'm going to share one more slide with and we're going to read this one. This is the poem that is at the final page of the SCBWI bulletin this month, I believe. But
Right.
this was one of your monthly prompts. You had the word us and you created this poem. And was it Jane Yolen who suggested you send it into the bulletin, right?
Yeah, it was one of those days when I finally got around to posting my poem for the month. And she said, I love it. She said, if you're a member of SCBWI, you ought to send that to them. They'll publish that. So I was, and so I did, and so they did.
Yes. Can you see this on your screen? Can you read this for us, or would you like me to read it?
I can't see it. It's
Okay.
too small.
Too small. Okay. Here's to us. For those of us who spend our time mining words, rhythm, rhyme, and find the drudgery sublime, here's to us. For those of us who dream at night, tomorrow we'll resume the fight. Tomorrow we will get it right. Here's to us. For those of us who once in a while capture what we mean with style and write one line that makes us smile, here's to us. So thank you, David. I think that is a wonderful end to our evening.
Thank you.
We so appreciate you being here with us tonight, and I've gotten so many wonderful comments in the chat box of how they love seeing you, how amazing it was to hear you talk about poetry, and I think you're going to get a lot of new poets visiting your blog.
Well, I hope so. I look forward to meeting some new people. And Laura, I just had a wonderful time. Thank you so much for having me on, and I appreciate that.
Always a pleasure. And let us know when you win your next award, and we'll have you back. Okay.
I will do that.
Okay. Thanks so much. And thanks everybody for being here. And we will see you next week. Good night, everybody.
Bye-bye.